Hello everyone, and welcome to the Deep Blue Renegade podcast. My name is Molly, also known as the Deep Blue Renegade, and I'd like to welcome you guys to episode 36. Today is Tuesday, April 1st, 2014, and what is it? I always forget what to say after this point. Let me grab my coffee quick. I decided to put the camera further back so you can see some of the things I want to talk about today. Crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. I know what's exciting about today. Today is the start of the oldest anything knit-along. Aren't you guys excited? Woo! I have not yet started my project, but there's a good reason why I have not yet started my project. So, and in amusing news, I thought I was going to finish my holiday last week. Lies. I don't know what delusional thing I was thinking, but no way, Jose. But I did try on the Hallelujah before recording, and it's actually looking pretty good. I suppose I can do that for you guys now. So take off the featherweight. It's a little bit chilly today, inside the house. Ironically, crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. So this is the Hallelujah so far. I ended up just putting it on longer needles. It's still not long enough to go all the way around me at this point. I would have to extend the cables a little more, but I put them on my Xiaogu interchangeable so that I could try it on and get a better sense for the fit. It's definitely a very different color than the purple sweater. So, I know that last week I was talking about trying to figure out if the sleeves were correct and stuff like that. And what I ended up doing, Wednesday was I got it all seamed in, and then I had my friend Jen look at it, and she was like, it looks fine. So I'm just going with it. So I have one sleeve that was knit between small and medium, and another sleeve that was knit as a medium. And because there's really only 2 stitches difference between the two, it should be fine. So this is what it looks like on. It does look actually quite nice with just the one button. So this is the point where the V-neck starts to go, and so that's supposed to be the location of the first button. Oh man, I'm like pronouncing button like Melissa. So this is Hallelujah, which is a pattern by Melissa of Single Handed Knits. And the yarn is the Mustache Helva, which is by Stacy of the Mustache Podcast. And it seems to be coming together pretty nicely. Oh, I'm trapped on yarn. There we go. So I have extended the length of this fairly significantly. So the pattern calls for 4 pattern repeats of this textured stitch, or it's called in the pattern the copycat stitch. I'm not really sure what it would be. I haven't looked through to figure out if there's a more formal name for it. And then it'll be the case where had I had a bit more length on this, then I'd be able to button it up. And it actually looks very, very nice at this point. I was getting a little worried that it was going to be the wrong size for me, and I think it's going to be fine. Especially with ribbing around here, it's definitely going to make that look much nicer, and this will actually be probably buttoning more like here instead of here. And what is it? So the sleeves take a little bit of adjustment to get on right, but it was something where, based on my mattress stitch, I sort of had to pull around the perimeter to make sure everything was seated correctly, because otherwise the armhole was a smidge small, but it's working out. And I'm almost done with the textured pattern in the sweater. Excuse me. So after I finish the textured pattern, I'm not sure if I'm going to switch to the sleeves or if I am going to, put the ribbing and buttonholes and all that other stuff on. I'm more inclined to do the sleeves next, just because. And it's the case where in this pattern there's a lot of cases where so you knit it in pieces and now most of the pieces are put together. And then there's a lot of interesting picking up stitches and then going off in a different direction. So in terms of if this is a top-down versus bottom-up, it's both at the same time. Some point at the waist and some point whenever at mid-arm, it switches. So it's been a lot of fun to knit so far, and I feel so much better that now I know the sleeves are good, because that was just a little bit crazy making. So that is how it's going so far. I thought I was going to finish this week. Whatever. It will be nice to get another sweater off the needles, so can't complain about that. And just in time for spring. Yay! It's seen, what was it? My birthday was Sunday, and I'd like to thank you guys for the birthday wishes. I'd like to especially thank Jose. She was so sweet and had sent, what is it? She had sent 2 patterns that were on my wish list, so thank you, thank you, thank you. So she sent me, So she sent me Strand Wanderer, and then she sent me a Boonitz pattern, which I'm forgetting the name of at the moment, so I will look it up. Notebook, library, tablet. Tablet makes life more challenging right now. And I do have ideas about what yarn I would like to use. So she sent me Strand Wanderer, which I will open in a new window. And she also sent me Fragile Heart. So, loading. Let me find, this looks like a lovely picture. So this is Fragile Heart by Boonitz. And then Strand Wanderer. Let's find, this looks like a pretty good picture. So Strand Wanderer is intended for skeins of wool mice and lace and crazy pants colorways. So, glare. Oh, it's glaring off my screen. So there we go. So that's a picture of Strand Wanderer. So thank you, thank you, thank you. They're awesome. And I might be starting, what is it? So I'm doing this Crazy Knit-along, which is in the Woolmisa for All Seasons group. And sign-ups have closed already, I'm sorry. And it's the thing where you knit half a skein of Woolmisa lace, so at least 150 grams, in before sometime in June. So I believe what's going to end up happening is that I will be knitting my oldest skein of Woolmisa lace. And if it turns out I am sending out my semi-solid, then I will be knitting Strand Wanderer with my, it's sort of like Anne Colton Puller, which was actually the first skein of Woolmisa I ever had. It's this multi-lace skein. If it turns out that's the one that ends up getting pushed out the door, I'm probably going to be knitting Persephone, which is a Renee Levington pattern, with my Fritzi Frisante which is a teal semi-solid. But for the Fragile Hearts pattern, like I'm thinking that might actually be a really good candidate for my yak silk. It might be merino yak silk, but I think it's yak silk. It's nice. And it's really blue. So we shall see how it ends up going. I will not know what I'm sending out until later this week or something like that. And this is a story at KAL that goes snap, snap, snap. So it'll be the case where it's like, this is not a drill, get things now. Because as soon as your skein arrives, you can start knitting. And if you're knitting, like for example, 1,100 yards of lace, having it arrive in a timely fashion is appreciated. And speaking of that, my this is what I knit for the last time I participated in that KAL. So this is my featherweight, which is about 170 grams of wool mesa lace in the Magnolia Dark colorway. And what is it? So this is, whatever, a very nice, easy to wear sweater for days when I'm not wearing red. But I decided this time not to knit a sweater because I feel like I've been knitting so many sweaters. It's been a lot of sweaters lately. It feels not nearly as many socks as before. Which, speaking of socks, now that I've aimlessly wandered and talked about a bunch of other things, I am working on the what is it? The Moritz sock for my husband, the Dear Sweet Lovable one. But let's just say the magnitude of tangle that came from winding this ball of yarn. So I didn't wind it under tension, and it's a mess at this point. I probably need to rewind it, but I probably also need to restart the sock. I had him try it on, and let's not get this wrong. Like, the sock is really gorgeous. Oh, so far from the camera. So this is one pattern repeat of the lizards. So you can pretty clearly see at this point the black lizards and the red lizards. And it is too big on him, which ends up being an interesting problem. Because, oh, what is it? So it's too big. It's too big. The pattern repeat is 25 stitches. So I have 3 pattern repeats on the sock, and it's just too large. So I'm knitting these on 1s right now, so there is the possibility that I can start the sock again on 0s and maybe increase the amount of ribbing or something like that, but he has such small chicken legs and such narrow feet, and then this ridiculous heel. So it's the case where you don't necessarily want to go too tight, because then it's not going to go on as... So you're sort of playing this, like, whatever, game where you need to make it tight enough so that it's a bit of negative ease on his leg without being so tight that he can't put it on. So it's just completely crazy making, for lack of a better word. So I'm probably going to have to rip this bad boy out. And I went to my local local yarn store at River Knits, and I picked up a set of 0 needles because I destroyed them the last time I made colorwork socks by having my project fall out of my bag and then the door shutting and bending one of the needle tips off. I know, it was bad. Let's just say that Haya wasn't going to replace that needle. But I can't find my other 0, the one, so I was doing 2 circs or something. I was doing 2 circs. So I have a new 0, and I can't find my old 0, so I'm going to have to go back again and get another set of 0s because I just had no clue where in the world it ended up. And you know what, if I find the other one, fine, whatever. But they weren't open yesterday, so I have to go today. So they're not open on Sundays and Mondays, which is a little crazy making, because then it'd be the case where sometimes on Sunday I think about something and then I have to wait until Tuesday to actually pick something up at the yarn store. So, whatever. It's actually pretty windy out today. It's also sunny and beautiful, which is awesome. So, that is the story there. I don't know what I'm going to do about it. Like, it has been a lot of fun to knit the pattern, and it went fairly quickly. But I think my free time is going to be a little limited for the next 2 weeks, so it's going to make it hard to work on the Maurice pattern just because it is more concentration intensive than other ones, and the case where what is it? I have it in digital format. I might just need to print out a picture of the chart because I have a class where they get pretty pissy if you're using electronic devices in it. It's a seminar class, so I understand them. It's rude to do that sort of thing. So I need to print out a paper copy of the pattern, and it won't be a big deal. That's just the way things go. I got permission to knit. It's okay. And it definitely makes it way better. I think everyone else is really jealous that I'm knitting, that I'm actually getting something useful done during the class. Silliness. So, those are my active knitting projects. So the Holiday has been getting a lot more love because it's much easier to work on because I need my tablet in order to work for the moment on the Maurice pattern, which is by Stephanie Vanderlinden. I forgot to mention that. But, oh well, so I'll be ripping that out pretty soon because it just needs to happen. Like, I was trying to think of other ways to fix it, so I don't know if you guys have any thoughts. So, you know that there are patterns out there which you can knit like a strip of fabric and then pick up stitches on the sides and then knit them together, that sort of thing. Like right now I know that there's the big craze with like stitch surfers, which is maybe a different variation on that same idea. Well, it's sort of a different variation because you're doing short rows or something like that, whereas, so last year, I believe, I don't know, it was somewhere around last year, I ended up knitting a pair of, cinch socks. So it's the case where you knit a cuff, and then you start knitting back and forth, and you end up making this strip of fabric from, or basically all the way from the, like you end up making a strip of fabric that's as long as you want your sock to be. I ended up whacking in a normal flapping gusset heel. And then you pick up things on the sides, and you knit back, and then you pick up the bottom, and you knit the bottom of the foot. And I'm thinking about modifying that with the Maurice pattern. So it'll be the case where I'll knit, like, for example, half or 1.5 pattern repeats of the lizard, so you definitely see tessellated lizards, and then have it be a different yarn or whatever, like the red yarn or the black yarn or something like that, in ribbing so it's stretchy. And so I'll get the best of both worlds, is that I'll have the stretch of having ribbing, but then I will still have the cool colorwork pattern going along the front and the top of the foot. So that's what I'm thinking of at the moment as the best solution to my problem. And it's the case where the Maurice pattern has 1.5 repeats of the pattern on the top of the foot anyway, so I think it will be legit. So then it'll just be, I'll make a strip of this tessellation pattern, which shouldn't really be a big deal, and then I'll knit the rest of the sock in this janky new construction sort of way, which will involve doing color work flat, but that doesn't worry me nearly as much as doing it in tarja or any, like, I just don't want to go there right now. Like, I love my husband very much, and he's dear, sweet, and lovable, but oh dear God. This pair of socks is a bit of a headache, even if the lizards are cute and amusing. So that's the story there. So when I rip it out, I'll rewind this ball of yarn because it's pissing me off. So, the next thing, probably worth talking about, will be my vague, unspecific plans for the oldest anything KAL. And I need some more coffee. So I've been thinking about what I want to do for the knit-along. And it turns out that I can take care of a lot of my obligation projects at the same time. So I know that I talked about previously, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, about what my main project for the knit-along is going to be. Is I'm actually going to be spinning, and I'm going to be spinning the fiber optic gradient that my mother-in-law Joni got for me at Rhinebeck. And it is in the indigo to emerald colorway. Crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. This is fun. The source of crinkling. Just put that down there. And it is, as is typical for fiber optic, this is the, what is it? The merino silk blend. And so it goes from like this purpley blue and then fades into from teal into this like Kelly green. So it's quite lovely. And I wanted to show you guys the last thing I had made with one of Kimber's gradients, which is this hat. So this is my favorite hat. This is the hat where I learned how to draft. And it matches really well with the sweater. And it was the case where I ended up splitting it in half, and then I spun the 2 singles and I applied them together. So it turned out the ending color is actually approximately here, so it's this teal blue, you can't even see. So it turned out that because I started applying from the red end, and I still have like a decent sized ball of the red, and then it fades from purple, like a reddish purple to a bluish purple, and then it goes from dark blue to light blue to teal. But because I learned how to draft on the first part of the first single, that I ended up applying the blue back on itself at the very end. And then I started with the blue, and this was a top-down hat, and I knit until it seemed like a ridiculous length. So normally I just leave it fairly folded up, but it can be worn in a slouchy fashion. And so one of the things about this hat was that it's not particularly tightly spun. Gotta pull my hair up into it. So it's not tightly spun, and so it's been pilling a bit. So I'm thinking that for Joni's fiber, I am going to want to Navajo ply it, which means I'll be doing more Navajo plying or whatever. But then I can just spin this as one single, and then Navajo ply it all together. And then, what is it? Navajo ply it all together, and then call it a day. So, so then the color progression will be maintained, and it will be a heavier weight yarn. Because I'm getting the impression that Joni will not appreciate if I spin her frog hair. So, so the last skein that I ended up spinning for her was probably somewhere around a sport weight. So I'm thinking that this will be a good weight, and it is soft and delightful. So that. But I won't be able to start that until I finish what's on my spindle. But it's looking good that I'll be able to start probably sometime this week. It's looking promising. So that is the story there. But so the other thing was I did also want to have a knitting project as well. So what I ended up pulling out was this skein of Mountain Colors. So this is Mountain Colors. Oh, the staple was attached to the yarn. That's no good. So this is Mountain Colors. What is the blend? And this is a 90% superwash merino and 10% nylon, a 425-yard skein, and what is the name? Oh, this is Crazy Foot. There we go. I finally found it. So this is Mountain Color Crazy Foot. So it has blues and purples and greens in it. And what I wanted to do was to take my bag of scraps, as this is the never-ending the never-ending bag of scraps, and take some, for lack of a better word, some interesting, or some colors that ended up calling to me in superwash colorway, or in whatever, superwash yarns, and then making cranberry biscotti for my grandfather, because, well, my grandpa, like, wears the socks I made him every day. He deserves more socks. So I'm thinking I can hit two birds with one stone by making him a combination thereof. Though, looking at my Binna scraps, it might be, whatever, a little bit interesting getting enough superwash in order to do that. For some reason, slouchy isn't working for me today. So I will have to think upon the matter, because it turns out it's looking like my superwash is in crazy colors. But, or maybe I'll just knit him a pair of socks using this. It shouldn't be a big deal. And I'll use some different pattern. But this is the oldest full skein in my stash, so I definitely want to find use for it, because it's pretty and soft, and I don't know why I haven't gotten around to it yet. So that's the plan there, or maybe I'll do something like contrasting cuff, toe, and heel, or something like that, because he does have, I don't know if it's that big. I don't know, the last pair I made him were out of wool myself, which is why I knew it was going to be tough enough for machine washing. So I might just have to make crazy socks out of the scraps, because like the bag is full. I can't fit more things into the bag, and that makes me feel silly. So it would be nice to use up things when I'm. It's sometimes hard to figure out the best way to use them up, if that makes any sense. Or maybe I'll make scrappy socks for my husband, since he has a reputation for ridiculous socks. And let's see. Oh, I had pulled out my size 4 needles so I could bind off the Halalea when I get to that step, using bigger needles than the needles I'm using. So that's sort of the vague plans. I feel now a little bit silly that I was planning on making cranberry biscotti, but it's not going to work anymore. Maybe I have colors that would work better in Woolmisa. So I might also have to pull out my Woolmisa scraps and figure out if that would work too. But it looks like, what is it? Well, I can make socks for myself, and I can make socks for my husband out of the, let's just say, 100% superwash merino sorts of things. I know I'll be taking care of them, and I'll take good care of them, but I know my grandmother is washing them in the washing machine, so there are some yarns I'm willing to do that, and some yarns I'm not, and the yarns that I am willing to do that in that bag are in acid bright colors. Oh, silliness. So it's not gonna work. Rats. But I'll figure something out. There are a lot of really gorgeous patterns that I can make. I could probably make Earl Grey or something like that, and that would end up looking very good with the skein of yarn. I get the impression that it's mostly blue with flecks of other colors, so it'll probably be a lot like Jitterbug in that regard. So on to the next thing. The next thing I would like to talk about is spinning. And let me get some of this other stuff out of the way. So, I am still working on the Fat Cat Knits Variegated BFL, and what I have here is my plying ball of singles, and what I have here is my Navajo plaid yarn. So I ended up spinning and spinning and spinning until I got to a really bright, colorful part. I know there was a run there where it was, I guess, less dyed for whatever reason, so it wasn't as ridiculously bright as before. So, and you can tell, like, it's maybe a little, like it does want to twist on itself a little bit, but I'm plying from the outside to the in, so then as soon as I had finished spinning my singles, then I had put that end on the ball winder and then wound it up. And so then the end is still what was pretty crazy coming off of the ball winder, because that was what had been most recently had twist put in it. But then the rest of this, it's been taking me months in order to spin this stupid stuff, so it's had a nice long rest. And it seems to be coming out lovely so far. We'll just try to hold it still. So right now there are a lot of oranges and pinks with a, and it's going to be stripy. And it seems to be coming out very nice so far, so it'll just be the case where I've been, in order to entertain myself while plying this, what I've been doing is I started watching the old episodes of the Knit Girls again, so I actually thought it was sort of funny that Laura had mentioned, whatever, back in 2010 that she had gotten a skein of lupine in Mountain Colors Crazy Foot, so I just thought that was hilarious. But yeah, so this is coming together nicely. So I finished this Sunday night and then had plied probably 15 or so grams that night, and I believe so far I've plied about 30 grams. So it'll be just something that I'm working on. Like, it'll probably be actually, what it'll be best for is at movie night tonight I'll just probably be sitting on the couch plying this, because I would really like for it to be done so that I could start my next spinning project, because this has been going on for a long time. And I have no clue when I would get around to knitting these socks, but I know that it'll be really gorgeous. So soon I will have yarn for hand-spun socks. For some reason, however it was twisted up, the duller colors seem to be showing more. And then if I dig into it, you can see some of the brighter ones. So I'm not sure how that ended up working out, but such is life. So I just keep the center pole ball inside my spinning bag, and then I just wear it on my wrist and when I do my loop-de-loop-de-loop, and it's been fun. What I wanted to talk about next, which I forgot to grab, but it is close by. I realized that whenever last week's episode was going to be really, really long, so I decided not to talk about this book, but not this weekend, but last weekend. My friend Anna gave me a bunch of spinning books to borrow, and one of the ones that she let me borrow for now is Respect the Spindle by Abby Frankenmuth. And I would highly recommend reading the book if you spin on spindles. The idea being was that Abby's thesis statement in this book is that using a spindle, you can spin just as efficiently as using a wheel, and her additional argument is that it's actually, what would you say? It's actually more comfortable and more ergonomic to spin on spindles than it is a wheel. So she does own a wheel. But the interesting thing about that was that she got taught to spin when her family was living in the Andes. So at the tender age of 5, she was already a couple years behind the other girls in terms of spinning. And it's just a case where, because it is, and so then it was the case where they spun yarn in order to weave. And it was the case where it wasn't for like 3 years before she began to produce acceptable yarn for weaving. So it's the case where, because there was this culture of spinning and this expectation that everyone learned how to spin and everyone be a good spinner, that there were a lot of efficient things about spinning which she ended up learning. And then when she ended up seeing wheels for the first time, she's like, you can't take it wherever you are. It has to be in one place. It's heavy. It's big. So there are a lot of benefits to a spindle that I think oftentimes people think it's just people tend to think of spindles as like that baby step where you figure out if you like to spin. And what was it? It was something, a comment was made because my friend Jen, for example, gave me one of her spindles when she taught me how to spin. And it was the case where she was like, what was it? She had said like I'm jealous, like you're like so smooth and so efficient with your spinning. And I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that maybe I don't necessarily spend every day spinning, but I do, like, I've spun I feel that I've spun pretty significant amounts with the spindle, and while I still have a lot to learn, it was interesting to see that I sort of got my rhythm together and how I go from getting it started, spin, winding it on, and then getting started again. So a couple things that were interesting about this book was, I guess that I'm a little bit odd in how I like to have my yarn evenly wrapped like over most of the shaft of my spindle. So like this is, so I'd ending up as answering Bridget's question. So this shaft is 10 inches long, and I end up filling pretty good 7 inches of it with yarn. And normally what people end up doing is they'll crowd it on one end, or they'll put it towards the middle. And it's something where Abby was talking about different ways of winding yarn on here. Because the further out the yarn is, the more the yarn is contributing to the rotary inertia of the wheel. And by loading my yarn in this way, I'm not changing the rotary inertia much, because the weight at the center allows it for, having more weight at the center allows it to spin fast. So if you have lots of weight on the outside, it slows down the spin as you go. The other misconception that I had after reading this book was I thought that you weren't supposed to put more on your spindle than the weight, and that appears to be incorrect. It turns out that with a heavier spindle, it takes longer for it to spin normally, or to spin in a good way, or whatever, an optimal way or something like that, if you're spinning a fine yarn. And so that was very interesting. So it's the case where if you can really pack it on and it's still spinning and you're not having issues, then it's fine. And that both of my spindles are actually on the heavier end of spindles. So this is a 2.6 ounce. My other spindle is I believe it is a 3 ounce. And so is the case where that was, in Abby's opinion, about as, 2 ounces was about as heavy as you wanted to go. So it might be interesting at some point to end up getting a lighter spindle and see how I like it. Because I've been sort of thinking that I would like a Turkish spindle, but obviously this takes time in stocking and stuff like that. So that was an interesting thing. So it'd be the case where you don't want to have too heavy of a spindle. I also was getting the approach, I wanted to save my camel silk for when I had a wheel, but it sounded like it'll actually be easier to spin on a spindle, especially a light spindle, so that might be a good reason to get a light spindle. I don't really want to go in the direction of supported spindles, just because it's so much different than what I'm used to. And supposedly it'll be the case that it'll make it easier to spin something like the yak silk, but the camel silk. But I think it's the case where I would because the silk is increasing the staple length, I think it's going to be better to just do it on a drop style. What was the other thing? So it did have a section where it was teaching how to spin, and I skipped that. It does have a section on troubleshooting when you're having issues, which I thought was really interesting. And then towards the end, it had, probably the most interesting thing to me was that it had a way of systematically figuring out how to increase your efficiency. So it'll be the case where you have a friend time you a couple of to time you to figure out what parts of spinning are taking the most time, and whether or not that makes sense. So it'd be the case where figuring out if winding's taking a long time, how can you speed up winding, or drafting is taking a long time, how can you speed up drafting, and stuff like that. Or you don't seem to be spinning long enough, so you're stopping pretty frequently to get the spin going again, so how can you spin in a way that makes it, that keeps it spinning long enough for you. So there is a great deal of information in this book. And it turns out that Abby disdains non-applying, but I don't care. It's fun. So it was very interesting. Probably something which sounds interesting, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to try it yet, is doing something called double drafting. So it's the case where it's maybe more known in like the Navajo and Indian traditions, where it's the case where you pre-draft, you put some spin in, and then you pre-draft, get spin in a more long draw sort of fashion, and then you work out your bumps and kinks worsted style. So apparently it is a faster way to spin, but it seems like it would be very slow initially to learn and figure it out. So I don't know if that would be something. It might take a lot of YouTube videos to figure out how, so I might grab some fiber at some point and see how it goes. Which I would probably need to be a longer staple, but who knows? I'm not sure. So I would highly recommend getting the book because it's just the case where it was very interesting to read. I know that it's on my Amazon wish list, and I'm keeping it there. Like, it would be very nice to own this book, if that makes any sense. So I will be rereading the section about increasing your efficiency at some point, and I'll probably have to have some friends time me to try to figure out if there's a good way of increasing my efficiency while spinning, because it just seems like it takes me a long time to spin, and I don't know if that's just because I don't set aside enough time to spin, or if I'm just not being very efficient when I spin. So that's sort of the question there. So respect the spindle. Very cool. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was, I don't know if I showed this on the podcast. I ended up getting this a few weeks ago. This is a skein of Raku Regenbogen. that I ended up getting in D-Stash, and it is basically a dark rainbow color. And this is in Woolmisa Twin, so it is, so then this has dark blues, dark orange, dark red, dark green, and purple. And I think it's going to make a really awesome pair of socks at some point. I keep on accumulating these multi-skeins of Woolmisa Twin, and at some point I'll be knitting socks for myself again. And I want them all for me, which is why I don't seem to be using them right now. But I'm really excited that I ended up picking up this color, so, because I think it had arrived in the mail like after I podcasted or something, so there you go, you see it now. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about what I'm planning on doing next. So this is the small ball of Woolmisa DK that I ended up receiving. It was a gift from a friend, and really it's not anything to do anything with, but this is the Mao's Young colorway, which is the colorway that I had intended to purchase and then failed. And so what I've been thinking was to try to make, what is it? So I ended up putting up my Feldmaus in D-Stash in a couple of obvious places to D-Stash Woolmisa. And no one's taking me up on it. I think because because you can easily buy it in the shop, so why would you bother trading with someone when you can easily just purchase it direct from Germany? So I'm going to be stocking in the meantime. But as an amusing sort of thing, so I have this color here, which is a brown-gray color, so if we compare it here, it's definitely fairly dark in the grand scheme of things. But what I'm thinking of doing is I ended up stopping by the powdered drink aisle last night at the grocery store, and I picked up some Kool-Aid, because you know what? When all else fails, I can make it blue. So I ended up picking up 10 packets of the Kool-Aid, and I'm not sure how many it's going to actually take to dye the amount of blue that I have. I'm not sure. So I'll have to do some research again. For a little while I was a part of That's a Cool Way to Dye group on Ravelry, and they are a really great resource for figuring out what to do with dyeing yarn. But I ended up, it was just the case where I go in cycles with how many groups I'm in, so it'll be the case where I'll be in a bunch of groups and I'll be like, I can't keep up with those groups, and then I decrease the number of groups. And so then that was one of the ones that went, because it wasn't the case where I was passionate about dyeing, it was just occasionally I wanted to dye. Oh, there is a finch in my, yeah, because it's red and gray and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure that's a finch. That's hanging out in my front porch right now. Awesome! It was my bird watching knowledge is greatly diminished, but whatever. So I don't know when I'll get around to this, but I now have all the materials I need to over dye this. And if I'm adding blue to this, it'll probably be a pretty dark color after I add blue to it, but I'm not sure how it's going to interact with the brown, but we shall see. I'm curious, so I'm thinking that this is probably going to be the best path forward from this regard. I do want to knit a gray DK weight sweater for myself at some point out of the Woolmisa DK, but it's looking, what is it? So it'll be the case where I've been stalking now and trying to find the Mao's Young or the, there are probably a couple of different colorways that would work, but we shall see, because it will be very easy to wear that sweater with a variety of things. So it's something where I like bright and bold colors, so this means that my sweater, if my sweater is a neutral, that ends up toning everything down and it looks nicer. Birds. Like squirrel. I'm distractible today. Well, that's really exciting that I'm having bird sightings. The world isn't alive yet, so it was the case where we ended up doing yard work, and it was probably like the only time where you did yard work and you were really happy about it just because it was so nice to be outside without a coat. So spring is coming eventually. There's some vague tulip-like flower that might be coming up in the flower bed because since this is a 95-year-old house, there are surprises in the gardens and you just roll with it. from gardens of the past. So we shall see. I think that's everything I want to talk about this week, which is, this week's also a long episode, but whatever. It was going to be ridiculously long if I had talked about respectability last week. So let's see. Today is the 1st. I will be recording again on the 8th, and I'm really excited about that. And I would like to encourage you guys to participate in the Oldest Anything KAL. Oh, that was the other thing. Let's see if I can look this up quickly. So I ended up putting in a request for prizes, but I haven't heard back from the person yet, so I might need to change how I, what is it? I will probably need to change the how I contact this person because I think that it would be really cool. But I ended up picking up a very pretty skein for you guys. That didn't work out so well. I did just want to look at the picture of this thing. Okay. So I ended up picking up a skein of lace weight yarn from Everything Old. Unfortunately, Anne is actually going out of business, so I ended up picking this up for a song. So it is 100 grams of lace weight in the Absinthe colorway. So it is a very pretty greens and or sort of the yellowish greens and bluish greens and yellow all together. So not this original. So this particular skein. So that will be one of the prizes for the knit along, and I'm hoping to get one more, which is why I ended up checking Etsy. But we shall see about that. And I'm not sure if I'll throw in something for my stash. I think it depends on how many people participate. It might turn out that one skein of yarn is plenty for how many people are participating in my group. I don't know, but the more people who participate surprise me and I'll dig something up and it'll be great. And so the important thing to remember about the KAL is that in order to post a picture in the finished object thread, you have to link to 2 posts in the chat thread. So you have to participate in the KAL in order to win the KAL. And the idea being that with this finished object post, you'll justify why it was old, and then we'll accept it. And this is, I forgot to mention, this is a joint KAL with Emily of the Watch Just Watching podcast. So I'm really excited to be hosting a KAL with her, and I hope you guys join in because it'll be fun and you get to knit what you were planning to do anyways. So it'll be fantastic. And I think that is everything for this week. So I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I will be seeing you guys in the threads. So talk to you later, guys. Bye-bye.